So in this tutorial, we are going to look to build a serverless web application with the help of Amazon Lambda, API Gateway, and Amplify, and DynamoDB, and Cognito. Now, the basic architecture here is going to use multiple services in order to host a static website, and that static website will be served from S3 and will be deployed from Amplify. Then we will look for the authentication of user when user need to put in a username and password using Amazon Cognito. Now the API Gateway and the Lambda and the DynamoDB will be used for later on for the API call. Now this application could take you 2 hours to finish, and the cost of this tutorial, if you are going to do this from your root account, will be charging you for all the resources you create, so you must better delete them once you are here. So if you are having a root account and you want to do this tutorial from your root account, you can follow this project in AWS projects and you can follow the tutorial. They provide you, for example, for 5 major steps, which is including terminating resources. For hosting a static website in S3, you have multiple ways to do it. Whether you do it via a CloudFormation or you do it in a step-by-step. Now, unfortunately, these resources here are for the people who have full control and they don't want to dig deep inside the code. So for this reason, I want you to work in this workshop here, in AWS workshop, and this is for the wild ride. So this link here will be available in the description, and also this link for the AWS project. Both they are going to give you the same result, but it depends how you want to do it. You want to see the outcome and the results and how these application and services integrate with each other, or you can just do it from scratch and build it with the help of a Cloud9. So in the first setup here, in the first step here, we want to start by doing a static web hosting for a website that we will host in S3. So we will focus in each step in the resources that we are going to use and the services. So the idea here, we have a website. It is a basic HTML with CSS and JavaScript, and we want to use AWS Amplify to download it. Now we have used Amplify before, which can be very handy to deploy a static website or to deploy an application. So in the first step, I'm going to select a region, and for this particular tutorial, I could use US East, North Virginia. You could use any region which are those services available, including AWS Code Commit. Now, Code Commit, guys, is equivalent to GitHub. GitHub owned by Microsoft, Code Commit owned by AWS. In Code Commit, we want to create a repository, and we want to clone the GitHub repository that we have for the website. So let me now show you in the management console what we need to do. So from my management console, I need to go to Cloud9, and from Cloud9, I want to create a new environment called serverless. So this is going to be my dev environment where I will pull the repository and I will push it back to Code Commit, and I will use that to deploy it via Amplify. I will use this T3 small. Even you could go for a larger one if you want a more robust machine like M5 large. And we will keep the default setting. I'm not going to change this to any other settings. You could host it in the lab VPC. It doesn't make any changes, but this will make it more secure if you have a lab VPC from previous labs and previous tutorial. And now I want to create the environment. Now this will take a few seconds or minutes to launch. Now let me show you before I go further this code repository in GitHub. So this code repository in GitHub, it's not in Code Commit. And the idea here, we want to take it from GitHub and we put it in our code repository. So this is a serverless application, and it contains a website that we want to clone and to deploy to Code Commit. You could launch the application locally if you want to test it as well in your computer using and following those tutorials. However, the next step for me, guys, and I'm following, be careful, I'm following this link, Web App Serverless Workshop, not the one in AWS project. The one in AWS project, it will be just to see the outcome. It won't give you a detailed instruction similar to what I want you to learn. So once my Cloud9 is ready, I want to do a few things here. I want to code the static website to be called and pull the code of the static website, and I will put it in code commit, and then I will deploy it. So let us go to the first step. In the first step, I will put this command, which is an AWS Code Commit. Remember, with the Cloud9, you have full permission to access all the AWS SDK. So it will be very handy because you don't need to configure the credentials and the AWS configuration. So I'm going to do this command, create -repo, and this will be taking the name wild rides. Now, equivalent to this, if you don't want to use the command line, what you could do before I just put this step, let me show you in another AWS Management Console. I will look back in. If you don't want to create the code commit using the code command line, what you could use is to go to the code commit console, and from the console here, you can just create a repository. And you give it the same name, Wild Rides, or you give it my repository and so on. And this will give you a link for that code commit repository to push the file into it. So let me go back here, and then I will press enter. So if you go to your code commit now, repository, and refresh, you will see that there is a new repository here, which is a folder, guys, that you can push and put the data in it in order to be monitored by the Git protocol, which allow us to commit changes and pull changes, create branches, and so on. In the description, I will leave a link for a tutorial about GitHub. But I assume you know GitHub, you have been using it before. Now let us move on. I want now to clone the repository, which is using the git command git clone, and the link that I just put there, AWS Serverless-Web App workshop.git. So if you look here now, I have a folder, a new folder created for me with all the source code that I will use. And this is my static website with all the images and the content that I have. I will go to that particular folder, which is the CD, AWS. And from there, I want to split it into 2 branches. Now, why I'm going to do that? Because I want to deploy one of those branches alone, and I don't want to deploy the other one. So I'm going to install now a git subtree. Now, normally in Cloud9, these should be already installed, but just in case to make sure we are in the right thing. Now, let us split the code into the one we are interested in into a branch, which is like pull request, and we will call it wild rides view. Now, will create a branch that I can move to my local folder, I can control. In the next step now, I need to create a new folder. So this is the Git repository. Now I need to create a folder here for myself. This is where I will put my my code. So I'm going to use make directory. And this will be // which means create it in the environment, not inside this folder. And I will call it wild rides. So you see now I have a new folder. I need to navigate to that folder, // wild tab. And this will take me to that wild ride folder there. So I am now inside this folder, and this is what I'm going to do. I want to initiate this folder to be under the watch of Git protocol. So any modification I made to files, I can commit them, I can roll back, and so on. So I will do git init. Now, most likely Cloud9 will come with all these tools pre-installed, and this is the sweet thing about using Cloud9 as a dev machine. Now, inside this folder, be careful here for this step, which is the wild ride, which is my folder. I want to pull the branch that I just created, which is the one wild rides view. So I'm going to go git pull // go to that folder, which is under the watch of Git, and give me this branch, which is wild rides view. So you can see now, if you expand with the Cloud9, you can see there is multiple folders created for me. There is a source folder as well. And there is a public, which contains my public website, and there is an index.html, and so on. So up to this stage, we are good. We have pulled the branch that we are interested in into my folder. So I don't need this folder anymore. So not to get confused by it, I will remove it in the next step. So before I do that, now I need to git remote, add origin, code commit wild rides. So in this command here, I'm just saying, put everything in my source code in my wild rights folder into the code commit folder, which is the one I have here. So I will go back to Cloud9, and from here, I need to basically put this command. And now all I need to do is just to push that this is my master branch to code commit. Git push -u origin master. So if you go now and look for modification in the code commit, you could see that code commit in that folder. You could see now there is a modification happened to it, and there is a new source code added to it, which is, this is exactly what we need to proceed to the next step. Let me close this so I don't need to confuse by it. Okay. Now, in the following step, I will put this command, or you just right-click from Cloud9, and this is why Cloud9 really handy. You don't need to do everything via command line. Right-click, delete, or you can just put this command, rm, which is remove, recursive files, all files and subdirectories, AWS Serverless Workshop. Will be the folder, and this means I'm only interested in this particular folder here. So up to this stage, we should be able to have the source code ready in code commit and linked with our Cloud9 environment. So let us move now to the next stage, which is to deploy the code. In order to deploy the code, guys, we need to use a service called Amplify. And Amplify is a very handy service which can be used as a deployment service. Similar to any deployment server you used before, or maybe you never used any deployment. It's very handy to develop and deploy mobile and web applications. Okay, so now in Amplify, you could see get started tutorials there, and you can see it's very compatible with React.js, with Vue, with JavaScript, with Apple and Android. You can deploy a secure, scalable, full stack application, which is very, very handy. And you can configure the UI component, the backend, and the front end, and deploy it using multiple Git code repository, including GitHub, Bitbucket, or Code Commit, or GitLab. And it will be highly scalable and highly available. Now, in this particular scenario, I am interested in hosting a web application, not a mobile application. So I'm not going to use Amplify Studio. Later on, I will post another tutorial about Amplify Studio. So I'm going to go and click on Get Started. Now, what is the source? Where is my code existed? It is existed in AWS Code Commit. So I click here in Continue. Now, if you select here, you can see the code, which is the wild rights, the one I just created in Code Commit, okay? And it is there, so I don't need to worry about it. And the branch, which is the one I create, which is the master one. Click on Next. Now, in the next one, it will select the backend environment for this. So WildRide, it is my backend. I could also choose an existing production environment. And here it will ask me to create a new role. Now, this is why I'm telling you, you need to do this tutorial from an IAM user with admin permission, or from your root account. So we can create a new role. And the wizard here will create a new role for us, and that role is going to be with the permission Amplify read only. So this is only for reading the Amplify, and this is give administrative access to Amplify to read your code commit. I could put a tag here, and I will say this is my server. So later on I could delete these if I'm not sure what they are. Serverless workshop. And then I click on review and create a role. Now, mainly here, if you go back to the console and refresh from this little icon here, you could see that the new role has been created. Click on next, and I could create a new environment, and here I will call it production. So this is maybe my production ready environment. Okay, and I click next and save and deploy. Now, this is basically going to deploy that static website into an S3. It will create a bucket and it will be deployed. And now you can see in this user interface here that it is now provisioning, building, deploying, and verifying. So it also creates a demo or a template URL for us. So this is the URL of our application. So if you open it in a new tab, you can see it will tell me now, this is your first deployment. Just give me a few minutes until I deploy the code. So we need to wait until it completely provisioned, build, and deploy the code. You could go back to this website and keep checking until it's deployed, or just monitor here the page of Amplify to see that the deployment has been mainly finished. What we could also use and utilize the time, we could go back to our Cloud9, and from our Cloud9, I could open the files that I have in my Cloud9, and I will do a little bit of modification just to make sure that my code commit and Amplify are working as expected. So I'm going to go to my wild rice folder, to the public. In my public folder, I have a file called index.html, which is appear here. So let me just download. So we are going to work in the index.html, and we can just change a few things. For example, the title, I'm going to change this to, let's say, something like rights of the future. And I will save the changes. Now make sure you save the changes here. And now let us do basic Git management, which is basically we just modify the code. So we need to do the following. We need to do git add dot. Now this will add all the modification, even if I create a new file. And now I will create a new message, a git commit with a message, git commit -m, which is the message. And I will say here, update title. So now this is the message. It will appear in my Git repository with the modification. And now all I need to do is just to git push the changes. Now, once I do git push the changes, this will trigger Amplify to rebuild the new modification of my code. And this is basically the concept of continuous deployment. You change the code and you keep deploying. And that's why those services like Code Commit, GitHub with Amplify are very used in the industry, because you don't need to do another building, deploying again, and integration testing. You only modify a few things. Maybe after a sprint meeting in the morning, you just had a few changes, a few bug fixing, and you just want to deploy those bug fixing. And you can simply just, once you commit into the code, it will trigger the deployment. And this is make those tools very, very popular. Now, this is still deploying, so we need to wait for it an extra 2 or 3 minutes until we can see it is fully deployed. So you can see now the deployment is completed. We can also go back and check, still not. This is the backend completed, still doing the UI. So we will wait now. Normally it will take 5 minutes. Once this finished, you can see here, this is production and the new URL that you have there. Okay, now if you go to your Amplify again and you refresh the page, you can see that the deployment has been finished. The production now is there. You can refresh the page again if you want. And now if you go to the wild rides and refresh the page, you can see this is my fancy website, which is a simple website just to basically download the app, you request a unicorn and pick a ride. And this will be basically what's the app all about. Now, if you notice in the menu here, the user could register, create username and password. So how we are going to offer them this ability? In order to offer them with this ability, we want to use another service which is used for managing services, which is the code AWS Cognito. In Cognito, we create a user pool, and that user pool will be used by the user to register their username and password, and they will give them an STS code and authentication code, and that authentication code will be sent to their email, so they can basically use that email to verify their account. And when they sign in and they put username and email and password, there is a JavaScript function in our code will interact with Amazon Cognito in order to authenticate them using the secure remote password protocol, and they will receive a JSON web token, which can basically contains the identity of the user, and it will be used to authenticate them with a Restful API that we will build inside our code with Amazon API Gateway. So let us now move to the next step, which is to create our user management. In order to create a user management now, what we need to do, we need to go back to our AWS, and we will have to do two things. We need to go and create and install Amplify CLI in our Cloud9. Most likely the tool should be there, should be ready installed there, but just in case, we need to reinstall it again. So npm, which is the node package manager of Node.js, install AWS Amplify /CLI, and this will download the code. We can configure now the AWS config. Now this step is not recommended in Cloud9, but it is already there because Cloud9 by default put and create the credentials and the profile for the Cloud9 environment, which is echo profile default to AWS config. So you can also look to the file and open it if you want just to check the content of it, and you see it now. I'm here just saying go and use the profile default, which is created by Cloud9. Now in the next step, I have to do two things. I need to basically change and tell Amplify that I want to initialize the CLI. So I'm going to do this command, amplify init, to initialize it. And this will initialize Amplify, and it will ask me for a set of questions. Now, what kind of environment is there? This is production. Now, which kind of Visual Studio? Now, Cloud9 is very similar to Visual Studio, so I'll keep this to the default. And I'm going to use an AWS profile. And this is the profile default. And now this will initialize the project in the Cloud9 Amplify app. And this will create a role. And that role will be used to create an AWS Cognito user pool. So you can see here, it successfully create and initialize AWS resources. And you can see that the status of Amplify and the backend and so on. Now you can verify the version of Amplify by just putting this command, amplify version here, and it is 8.1. Even you could go to Cognito now, and from Cognito you could see there is a new user pool created for us. So if you go to manage user pool in Cognito, we should be able to create now a new user pool here in Cognito from the Amplify CLI. So let us move to the next step. We need to stay on the same folder. Be careful at this step, guys. You need to stay on the folder which is the wild ride in your Cloud9, and we will do amplify add authentication, and this will add the code snippets to our existing application in order to interact with Cognito user pool. Now this will take the default configuration, okay? And in the next step, all I need to do is just to press enter. Yes, I am done with without any advanced setting here. And this will add a new integration of the code to Cloud9. And you can read here in green, the next step is to do amplify push and publish in order to build the modification I made to my code here to integrate it with the Cloud Cognito, with Cognito user pool to push it back as well. So you could do it via multiple ways, but let us keep it similar to what we have been doing, which is the GitHub way. So we do git add dot, so the git way, git add, we add everything, and we will do a commit to commit the changes with a message that this is configuration, configure Cognito, and now I will do get push. Now this will trigger the Amplify console to push the changes and deploy the new application. And once this is deployed, it will create what we need to have, which is the user pool. So if we go back now to Cognito and refresh the page, in a few minutes now you will be able to see there is a new user pool created for us. I will add it to my favorites so I keep navigating to it in much easier way. So it will be added to the address bar here, manage user pool. Let us move to the new console, which is the previous user pool. Still this is deploying, so I cannot see the user pool yet, and there is no other modification happened, so I will wait for a few minutes. You can check the progress as well by going to Amplify to see the deployment, whether it is successful, and sometimes it will give you an error as well due to any modification. So you can see all my application, all my deployment that I have been doing since the start of the workshop. So this has been deployed successfully, and this is still trying to deploy. I will go back now to Cognito, and I will wait here to see the new user pool created for me. And we can pause now until this step is completely finished. You could see as well by going to the logs that this created a CloudFormation template, and this template will create a new CloudFormation stack. As you can see now, my user pool had just been created by the code, and if you open it, you can see there is users, groups, and you can add and create a new user to authenticate. Most likely you can create a div and a test users here, so you can just use them to test your application. So let us move now to create our first user. So let me go to Amplify and check that my deployment has been successfully finished. So this is now success deployment. So this is the first wild ride deployed at this time, and this is the second, which is just deployed now. Let me open it in a new tab. I will close this one, and I will go with the /auth. I will create an account, and I will call this the same. And this is my lab-password as well, with the email and with a demo, a temporary phone number. Okay, now we can see there is a successful registration for my account here. So if I go to Cloud Cognito now, let me open this in a new tab because it seems to be I need both of them. I go to users, and I can see here the Basil M username with this email address has been added. So what we need to do in order to make sure that this will be authenticated, and we will select that user, and from the action menu here, just let me delete this action, I can confirm the account. So this is allow me as well to verify my account that has been created. So I'm going to go and do a confirm of my account. So there is now a new user created, and it is confirmed. So let us go now to my application. With auth now, I can just refresh the page, and I will put the username, and I will put the lab-password, and click sign in. So now it gives me now an authentication code, and this authentication code generated by AWS Cognito. Okay, so this will authorize the API calls for that user with this kind of auth token, and those auth token I'm just going to copy them here. Now we are in /right, so make sure you are in this navigation now, so you can see that we are in the /right. So it seems to be everything working as expected. So up to this stage, guys, what we have managed to do, we have to manage to deploy a static website into S3. That static website was deployed by Amplify, and now I have a user Cognito, a user pool, which can allow me to get the authentication code for my users in order to be authenticated and request a unicorn ride and so on in any area in this map here. So the next step now, we need to build the serverless backend. In the serverless backend, we are going to use DynamoDB, and we will use AWS Lambda. So when the user click here in the map, request a unicorn ride, will pick up a location and send it, and trigger a Lambda function. And this Lambda function will save the ride details to Amazon DynamoDB, and they will return back, the Lambda function, return back a unicorn with details. So how we can now do this? First thing I need to do is to go to my DynamoDB, and from my DynamoDB, you can see here I'm using multiple services, and that's why this project will teach you a lot about multiple services, and also when you have a mobile or a web application to deploy. In my DynamoDB tables, I want to create a table, and I will call the table now rides, because will store the rides details. And for my partition key, I will partition my table to rides, because each ride is going to be an identical, and this will make no hot partition in my DynamoDB table. And there is nothing more I need to do, just the default setting, and then I will create a table. In the next step now, what we need to do is to create an IAM user, and this IAM user will be able to have a role for the Lambda function to create and to work with the DynamoDB table. So I'm going to go to IAM roles, and you can see there is multiple services and multiple tools we are going to use. And this is very handy because we will create an IAM role. And this is an AWS service. And we will select the services for Lambda and we click next. Now here I have a pre-configured role, so I'm going to just search for it, which is the AWS Lambda basic execution role. I'll select that one, click next, and I will give the role name the Wild Rides Lambda. And this is why I'm keep telling you guys, you need to have a root account in order to create this tutorial successfully. So we attach a policy, we give it a name, and we need as well to go back and create in that role, which is the Wild Rides. If we view it here and in the permission, we need as well to add, beside executing Lambda function, we want to give this role the ability to write into a DynamoDB table. So in the permission tab, we want to add an inline permission, add an inline policy. And the service I'm going to use, it is DynamoDB. And the policy, the action, I need to put an item. And from the resource section, I could specify a specific resource. And we will add an ARN. Now this ARN is going to be the one I have for my DynamoDB table. So if you have DynamoDB table opened in a new tab, or just go back to it again, DynamoDB. And this step is very important. So we need to be super focused and we need to make sure that we are doing the right thing. So this is my DynamoDB. There's so many prompts here. I'm looking for the ARN, the Amazon resource name for this DynamoDB table. So it should be overview, additional information, and this is the ARN. So let me go now to the create policy, and I will add. We will review the policy, and we will call this DynamoDB write access. So just in case for any audit I will make later on, I will make sure why I create this policy or what this policy do. So the tag is very important. So now I have a policy or a role with two permissions. There is the Lambda basic execution and the DynamoDB write access, which is an inline policy for putting an item for this table, which is the write table. So in the next step now, guys, we need to go to the Lambda function and we will create a resource. So let me go back to my console and I will go to Lambda, and you can see here there is multiple resources I'm using all together, and that's why I prefer to do this tutorial before you go to the AWS Solution Architect exam, or even before you do any job interview with AWS, because you will have more insight about the services that we have in AWS. So I'm going to create a new function now, and you can see there is two existing functions for Amplify, so nothing to do with us. One for updating the role and one for pool client that was auto-generated by the code I invoked. So click on create function, and I will give this function a name, which is going to be request a unicorn. So the idea, again, if you forget the logic of our application, just let me show you quickly. The user, once he click on the map, he will request a unicorn ride, and this will trigger a Lambda function, and that Lambda function will save the details of the ride in DynamoDB table and return back a unicorn details. You can change the logic to a taxi request. You can change it to anything as well, depending on your logic. So let me go back to Lambda, and I will call this request a unicorn. Node.js 12. So Node.js 12, and we want to have an execution role. And remember the role we just create. So we will use an existing role. And this is the existing role that I just create there in IAM. So the Wild Rides Lambda. And this will be it. So I will create a function. So now this will give me the function code, and it will give me as well the trigger. So we are going to now just to proceed, and we will recap what we just did. So we have an AWS Lambda, a serverless function as a service, which the product that basically remove the management of our service and the execution of our application. In the next step, we will configure a trigger, and we will set the role that the function can use to interface with the user request. and store it in a DynamoDB data store. So the next step now, guys, is to do the RESTful API. In the RESTful API, guys, we have an API gateway which will expose that Lambda function that you can see here with basically the public internet. So once the user requests using and authenticated using Amazon Cognito user pool, the configuration will be returned back to our hosted website and change it into dynamic web application by adding a client-side JavaScript that makes an AJAX calls to exposed API. So in that code, which is the index.js file, I need to do the following. Select all, delete, and paste the code. The code is provided to you in the workshop, a link that you have in the description. And now I need to deploy my function. So this will take us to the RESTful API, and the service we use in AWS for RESTful API, it is the API gateway, which can integrate with existing component, and the static website we deployed is going to be interact with that API that we will build in the system. So the ride route, which has a simple map-based interface for requesting a unicorn ride, will be requested after the authentication with a /sign-in. So we have a /sign-in first, and this sign-in will pick up the location and the point of the map, and we will choose the Lambda in order to make that request and save the details into the DynamoDB table that we just created. So here we will focus in two things. We will focus in building a component for the API gateway, okay? And we will also make sure to interact this gateway, API gateway, with our existing application. So let us move to the next step, which is the REST API. So in the REST API, guys, we will go to Amazon API Gateway, and Amazon API Gateway is one of the most famous, highly used service in Amazon because it will just make the logic much easier when you integrate and you have multiple applications. So this is my Amazon API Gateway, and this is what I'm going to do. So we will have the REST API card. This is the API card here. And in the API gateway, guys, we will click on create a new RESTful API. So we will develop and build a REST API. And in the create a new API, we will have a new API and we will call the API name wildcards. Now, just a quick note here, guys, try to follow the same name that we provide you in the workshop sheet, because these are very important for the integration. The code was coded to use those. And I will select regional. It's not a private API, or it's not anything related to an edge location. I'm going to go and create an API. So the API here in the API console, I have multiple things. I have the action, stages, authorization, and we can just discuss this in the future in the advanced tutorial. But we are interested in creating a specific request API endpoint. So we are going to proceed now to Cognito. Because the API gateway, guys, use the GWT token returned by Cognito user pool to give that API call and authentication. We will configure an authorizer for our API to use that user pool that we just created in Cognito. The API gateway, I need to look for something called authorization, which you can see here, the authorizers. And from here, I will create a new authorizer. And look what I'm going to do. I'm going to make this wild rights, the name of the authorizer. Now, the source is going to be Cognito, not Lambda Function, okay? And I need to provide the Cognito page. Now, if you click here, the Cognito ARN, or if you click in the text field, it will give you the existing Cognito. If you have multiple Cognito user pool, you should be careful here and select the right one. Now, in the Cognito user pool, once we select it, we want to make the token is authorization, and we will create. So all I did here to create a new authorizer, I'm just telling the API gateway, your authorizer in this case is going to be Cognito. This is the user pool, and the token source that you are going to get, which is in the header, will be the authorization token. and click on create. Now let us go back to our application and we will select the application with the /ride. I already have it there, but let me just show you. Ride again. And this will give me now an application authentication code. So in this particular scenario, we can go back to our gateway and we do a normal test. In that test page, guys, we want to paste the authorization token that I just get from the new authentication token that I just get from here. So this is what I'm going to do. Just pay attention to this step, what exactly we have to do. So we go copy the token from the /ride, go to your API gateway, click on the test. This will appear like this, the testing page, and paste the token. And just now we want to test that the Amazon Cognito is authorizing the API gateway. And you can see now we have verified the authorization of this user. So you can check the response code in order to verify that this is a successful authorization in particular to this thing. So you can see the response code, guys, here. It is 200. In the next step now, we want to create that API resource. We have a resources tab. The first resource is going to be for /ride, and this will be a post method for the resource and the configuration, which can use Lambda proxy integration backed by the request unicorn function we will create in the first step in this module. So in the left here, we are going to select resources, and from the action menu, we will create a resource. And here will give me now the ability to create a new resource. I will call this ride, and you can see now the path will be /ride, and we will enable cross origin request with CORS, so we can navigate between multiple domains, and then we will click on create a resource. We will now, with the new created resource, which is /ride now, we want to select now the post method in this kind of option here. So we can create a post method. We will create a method. We select it as to be post, and we will click on this sign there. And here where we need to fill the configuration. We will select Lambda Function for integration, and we will use Lambda Proxy as well for integration. And this is in US East 1. You can verify which region you are working on by just saying US East 1 here. And now we want to select the Lambda function that we have. So the Lambda function, if you recall, I call that Lambda function, and don't make mistake at this step, because many students, they think that the Lambda function I just create, we have 3 of them, but I am only interested in requesting unicorn Lambda function. So you need to make sure you are selecting this guy, not the other Lambda function. So request unicorn, and I will click on the save. Click OK. And now we will select method request card, which is the method request card here. It's appear on the right. And we have in that particular card, guys, we have an authorization. So there is like a small pen icon we need to edit. And who is my authorizer? My authorizer, remember, it's going to be the wild ride user pool that I just configured using here the authorizers. Okay, so I will click on update. There is no API key, and just go back. So you can see now the authorizer has been configured. Double check that we have our modification. Yes, we do. Seems to be the icon. It's not appear very quickly. So now I managed just to click on the tick sign. In the next step now, guys, we need to deploy the new modification that we have just made. So we have our API, we create a method for it, and we create as well a post method request with an authorizer, which is from the user pool, the Cognito one that I have there. All I need to do is to deploy my API. So if you go to your actions menu here, you can just deploy the API, and you can select the deployment as a new stage. And this will be a prod, because I have my application in a production stage in Amplify, and we will deploy. Now, once we deploy, will give us a URL. So we want to record that URL because we are going to use it later on. So at this step, we have the invoked URL, which is appear here. And let us now move to the last step of this tutorial. Okay, save changes. And in the next step, guys, we want to update the configuration from our Cloud9. So in our Cloud9 here, you can see in my Cloud9, I have multiple framework, multiple environment as well. And I need just to change things in it. So if you go to your Cloud9 and we open the source folder, so this is our source folder. Inside it, so just to show you from start while rides source, in the source folder we have a file called config.js. Open this file. Now as you can see, I just need to drag this thing, and here all I need to do is to replace the configuration with my invoke URL of my API, which is the API I just get from this step here. So copy this guy from here and paste it between the single quotation and save. As usual, the next step is going to add the changes of this folder to my Amplify to deploy a new version of the application. So I will do git add, and this is source/config. Remember, I'm still in the same folder. So if you navigate outside this folder, make sure you're still here. And then I will make git commit -m, and I will put a simple message here that I just managed to configure API invoke URL. Click enter, and now I want to push and deploy using Amplify the modification of my code. So the last step in this tutorial, guys, is to go back to your wild rides. Maybe open it from another screen if you want, or from the same screen, doesn't really matter. You could also sign out and register back using a user. A new user, you should just create another account. So let me create another account. Let's say Basil M222, and I will put a password same. Try to keep all these passwords similar in your tutorials so you don't forget them. And now I will put my work email because I used my personal email before. And then I will go to Dublin.ie and with a phone number that I can choose. You could put your real phone number here and you try, and we will see later on how you can also integrate it with Cognito. Create an account. Now I don't need to save. Now if you check your account email, you will receive a verification email from Cognito, guys. So if you do this step, check your email and you'll see that you will be able to get a verification code into your email address. So it will be very useful to make sure you have it there. So this is my authentication code that I just received. All I need to do is to copy that authentication code and save it. Paste it here and confirm. Now this is confirm the user. So I don't need to go now to Cognito and confirm the user manually. The user will be confirming himself by the authentication code and the verification code he received to his email. Click now in username Basil M2 and then the password, which is lab-password. Sign in. If things work fine, you should be able to sign in. I think my password is not correct. Oh, it was a bit slow. And you can see now I have a new authentication code. I could basically request a unicorn ride. We will see now why this error is. I will tell you a bit more about it, but we can see that everything is fine up to this stage. So if you reach this point like me and you go to your Lambda function, and just let me go from the beginning, the major step that you need to do before you proceed to the further step is to make sure that this Lambda function is going to give you the status OK when you send a new modification to it, or when the user requests basically a unicorn ride. So what I'm going to do in this particular scenario, I'm going to go to the test, create a test event. I will call this test request 2 because I want to troubleshoot, and this is where most people find it really hard when they're dealing with those high-level services. The no ability of track and testing and troubleshooting and debugging what's the issue. So I'm going to send this JSON formatted file, which is a JSON that basically will request a ride from the Lambda function. So you can see it's a post method, which is the one we configure in API gateway. And this is our authorizer. And there is a pickup location, latitude, and so on and so on. And then I will need to save it. And now when I go to the test, I can select the test request. And you can see there is an error here. So you can see the body of the error. They are saying one or more parameter values were invalid, missing the key rides in the item. The key rides in the item is basically the one we have in our DynamoDB table. So let us go now to our DynamoDB table and see why we forget to add an item called ride. This is going to be called rides. Oh, the item name, guys, the partition key is ride ID with type string, okay? And that's the error. Create a table. It's called rides ID. So now the table is created with rides ID, not ride. So now we need just to do one more update. Once this finish creation, remember this is going to be used by our IAM user. So in that IAM user, I need to go to make sure that I have the right ARN for my role. Remember the role we create was called, what was it called? Wild rides. So the wild rides, I can just find it from here. And from here, I need to change the inline policy. So I need to change this ARN with the new ARN. So I'm going to go edit. I could use the JSON formatted one, or I could use I will remove it and I will create a new one. So I will add a permission. This is going to be DynamoDB, just to show you from scratch. And for action, I need to have the ability of the Lambda function to put an item. And this is, you could select all resources. It will work, but you must better specify the table that you want to use. So I will paste now the ARN of my DynamoDB table, which is ride. Add and review and save changes. I go back to my Lambda function and I will do another test, and hopefully now I will get the status code 201, which means I am in the right way. I did manage to fix the issue. You could also verify this by going to your DynamoDB table, and you can just explore the content and you can see there is a new ride ID just added to the table. Go back to your website and refresh the page, and now let us click on the map in the capital Hill quest. All good, I'm getting the ride. So that's pretty much what you need to do to fix the error that I was getting. And you see, with a little bit of troubleshooting from Lambda and DynamoDB table, I managed to find the error I made during the creation of the DynamoDB table. Thank you and see you in the next one.